Hey everyone, I'm back. So last time we talked about the basics of the internet and what happens behind the scenes when you request a file from a website like index.html or home.html when you visit a home page of a website, and how that file is fetched from wherever that website is hosted at, and it's brought down to your computer and processed in your browser and then displayed to you. So then we talked a little bit about HTML. Gonna go a little bit more in depth into HTML now. It's not just the that it's the frame or the framework for your page off of which everything else hangs, but also inside of HTML there's also little elements and little ways of using HTML and labeling your HTML elements, page elements, that are helpful. So I'm going to go into that now. So I have just a little mock-up page here with just three basic elements anyway, with different colors, and I've styled them so that they kind of flex and grow with the page, the size of the window. So we can see here that there's opening and closing HTML tags, which I think we went into very briefly. And we see there's a closing tag here at the bottom with this little / to denote that it's a closing tag. And everything contained within that tag is HTML, including a head tag for your page, the head of the page, and the body of the page, which is the main part of the page. A lot of these terms, body, head, sometimes you'll see a footer at the bottom of the body. It'll look like footer, and it'll usually have like copyright, whatever, right? Something like that on your page. So usually with a lot of these terms, they come from your classic printing industry. So we used to have magazines or newspapers with a masthead, and that page masthead would be would have a lot of the page main information on it. So it's kind of like how the head tag of your page contains a lot of data, like metadata or information, tagging the page with keywords or the title, who's the owner of the page, and that sort of thing. That's usually what goes inside of the head tag. And then we also have our style tag inside the header, usually. So my code editing software, VS Code, as you might have noticed, there's a few lines skipped here between 3 and 25. I have the ability to just toggle them on and off when I'm not using them. So that's what that's doing there. This little handy caret icon here allows you to kind of table the code that you're not using for a moment and keep it out of the way. So these style tags, they have an opening tag and a closing tag, and in between the opening and closing is where you can put your CSS, or you can put a link to a CSS file. So if I open this up here, you'll see I have what's called a comment here in the code. So this line of code doesn't actually run. If I uncomment it, you'll see VS Code start to complain about some errors here. But when I comment it again, now it's just a comment, human readable comment. It's just notes for myself, a link to where I found some CSS information. And I can come back and do that later because it's a comment. So you can also do comments in HTML, and you can do comments in JavaScript as well. We can see more on that later. So I will describe what's going on with this CSS here, this styling. The CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. You do not need to know that. You can just ingest that information, put it in the back of your brain somewhere, and you will not need it again. If you do need it again somehow, you can always Google it. I always tell learners, don't worry about memorizing this stuff. Don't worry about memorizing syntax. It's like an encyclopedia or a dictionary or anything like that. You can go back and look it up when you need it. You do not want to waste your time and your sweet energy memorizing the dictionary or the encyclopedia, because while it's interesting, it's not useful and not an efficient use of your time. The only element that might be useful there is to know why it's called Cascading Style Sheets, which has to do with the behavior of CSS or how CSS works, and we'll get into that. So in order to understand this stuff, why does it say link 1, link 2, link 3, and what are these little hashtag # thingies? I will explain here. Let me just expand this a bit so you can see. So here inside the main body of the page, I've added a container or a div element that I've named container. I've assigned it a class of container. And then inside of that div, I've created 3 other divs. And I've assigned those a class of item. And I've given them individual IDs of link 1, link 2, and link 3. You'll see the IDs are unique. There's only one link 1, only one link 2, and there's only one link 3. They just correspond to each one of these individual IDs, right? And the ID also has an anchor tag in it, otherwise known as an A tag or a link. Fancy way of saying link, I suppose. And this anchor has a reference of, google.com or whatever these fake links that I've made here. Well, this isn't a fake link. Very handy CSS tricks. Chris Croyer, super handy. Everybody should take a look there. I have these links here, and that's what's inside this div element. Each one of these div elements has a different link and different copy inside, different text inside. So when you assign a class or an ID, you can kind of think of it like, let's say you're a school teacher and you have a room full of kids, and you want to create a red team and a blue team or something like that. I don't know why you would want to do that. Maybe it's for sports day in Japan or something. You can say all the kids who have red clothing on, or if you have a red shirt or red shoelaces, anything red on you, you go on this side of the class. I'm assigning you the class of red team. So we could change this here to class of red team, right? Just for illustration purposes, you see I've named this red team. So now I'm grouping all those students in a group. So all the elements on the page that I could call red team. Let's see, I could do this, and I could call all of these elements red team. So then I could say I want any element that's called red team to have this behavior or this characteristic or whatever. And I say, okay, red team, jump up and down 3 times. And then all the kids who have the color red on would jump up and down 3 times. So if you want to have an ID, on the other hand, that's something that's unique. So you get that, kind of think of it like a driver's license is an ID. It's only for one person. In an ideal world, only for one person. Some people have tried to ruin that for us, but I digress. So you could say like, Harold Smith, you are on red, you're a member of red team, but I'm giving you an even more specific identifier of Harold Smith. And just in case there's another Harold Smith down the hall in my other class, you're Harold Smith 1 and he's Harold Smith 2. So that's the way you can think about IDs and classes. We only want to use IDs once. Okay, now all the boring stuff out of the way, we'll get back to my style tag up here. And now you can kind of understand why I have this here. So what do you think this A stands for based on what we've just discussed down here? If you guessed this anchor tag, you're correct. These links are anchor tags, and this stands for the A element. So this basically means any an element with an ID of link 1 that is an anchor, I want it to have the green color text. Any element with an ID of link 2, which is an anchor, I want it to have blue color text, and so on and so forth. Here I have a class of container, which is represented by this dot here. And here this little hash mark or pound symbol, as I used to call it, represents that it's an ID. So here I've just assigned my container this flex property or flex behavior, which you'll learn about way down the road. If you want, you can look at this lovely Mozilla developer notes or MDN docs documentation. It's pretty much the go-to for your reference material on these. If you ever get turned around and you forgot what things stand for, or you forgot which properties do what, you can refer to MDN docs and they will be a tremendous help. You can search around in there for all this stuff. So any element with the class of item, which includes these 3 divs down here, I've assigned it a flex factor of 1. It just doesn't mean anything to you at the moment, but it just means that it'll move like this when I resize the window, as it should be. So that's pretty much the basics of CSS. One thing about the name CSS, which I neglected to continue saying, is there's a reason why it's called cascading style sheets. So if, let's say I add here another style and I just call it A, and then I say all anchor tags or link tags, I want them to be colored purple, right? And then I save that. And I try to refresh. It's not going to apply that style. I can confirm this by clicking inspect and looking at one of these links. I see the flex styling. And if I look at the anchor tag, I can see that this color purple has been crossed out. It's been overridden by a cascade here of CSS rules. So these rules here, it started out as purple on line 6. Then on line 14, it's telling me that, hey, link with an ID of 3, you can't be purple. No, you got to be red. I changed my mind. Here's a new rule. So there's a cascade or a hierarchy of how these rules are applied. Now, if I play around with these elements in my browser inspector, my DevTools, I can delete this red color command or rule, CSS rule, and look, it turns purple. Because now there's nothing overriding this purple rule up here. Now the red rule has been removed. So that's kind of where the cascade word gets applied there. And it can get kind of tricky when you have a super long amount of styles and you have very complex pages. So CSS it can be deceptively simple, but at least now you should have the basics down to understand how CSS works, and I hope that is helpful for you. Next video I'll get a little bit into JavaScript and how you can actually manipulate these things further using JavaScript. Thank you so much.